The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him, and 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent, for they had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to him, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. Ulahang adlaw kanatong tanan. The very context of our Gospel reading today is actually the second prediction of Jesus about his passion, death, and resurrection. And this happened after the Transfiguration. And this precisely important section, especially when we talk about the Gospels, especially the Synoptics, always brings into a very clear foundation of what and who Jesus is. As previously, Peter already confessed of him as the Messiah, the suffering, and of course the resurrected Lord. And at the same time, the experience that they had when he was transfigured. So this is a way, in other words, of trying to put the disciples into what we call a test of how they are able to connect with whom they are following and with what they actually are convinced themselves. And I'd like to shift a little bit, at the same time connecting this with the very beautiful exhortation from our second reading today. Okay, the first verse of the second chapter of the book of Ecclesiasticus or Sirach, when it says, "My son or my daughter, my son and daughter or my children, when you come to serve the Lord, prepare yourself for trials." And this is basically what we take into account, because the trials that we have actually may not necessarily come from the Lord, but from the people we are actually serving. Sometimes we get a little bit discouraged, and we sometimes even accuse of God for being really, strict or something, or cruel God. But these tests or trials are not to destroy us, but these are a procedural experience so that we can be strengthened along the way, every step of the way. These are forms of gauging or testing, the purpose of which is to strengthen us, not to destroy us. And this is what, in general, is termed the discipline that God gives. And I always relate the word discipline to the word disciple. A disciple is one who takes up the discipline, including the trials that come his or her way, so that as we go through the process, we become and we come out strengthened and purified. And this is the beautiful terminology used in the same first reading today as the crucible. The crucible actually looks like the cross. But do you know what a crucible is? The crucible is the instrument where gold and silver and the precious metals are being purified. And those who come into the center of the crucible are the purified metal. They come from different sides, just as trials come from different sides. But we end up continuously focused in the perfection that God wants us to achieve by following His Son, who also gave up His life for all of us to become pure gold in His eyes. Amen.